We are here to bring a new type of news show.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Bringing news just for you. It's Wednesday, June 5th here in Seoul. I'm Song Yujin, and this is News Generation. Joining us today is Cheska Nainha.
Happy Wednesday, everyone!
Happy Wednesday! And Choi Ji-hee.
Happy Wednesday.
Now, both are here to speak on behalf of those in their 20s and 30s. Now, we're going to move on right away to our main discussion topic of the day. Today is the final episode of our three-part Africa series. So yesterday, on Tuesday, we discussed African culture here in Korea. So today, we'll flip the script and explore Korean culture in Africa. So starting off, let's take a look at the big picture. Cheska, can you tell us how many Korean nationals or those of Korean descent are currently living in the continent?
Yeah, so this was a very interesting figure for me too. So let's take a look at the screen to see the actual figures of Koreans living in Africa. Now, as of last year, the number of Korean residents in Africa was over about 10,000 people, accounting for about 0.15% of overseas Koreans. Now, the top was South Africa, which was home to about 4,000 Koreans, followed very closely by Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and Ghana. And they have the largest number of Korean residents among many, many countries out there.
I see. So this is the graph shows a number of Koreans and those of Korean descent who are living in Africa. Now, I'm talking about the Korean community here, there in Africa. I kind of think that this first Korea-Africa Summit, the two-day summit, which is currently taking place today, is actually the last day. I think that this would have mean something really big to those to this Korean community in the continent, right, Ji-hee?
For sure, because Korean nationals living in Africa, they're in fact anticipating an increase in Korea's international standing after this first ever largest multilateral summit held between Korea and Africa. And they are also hoping for a more vigorous exchange in various fields as well. And on the 18th of May, in fact, last month, business people in Africa, they in fact held a meeting amongst themselves, and they're part of the International Korean Trade Association. And during the meeting, apparently, they discussed many different ways in which they can increase or enhance business ties and exchanges within Africa.
I think that some fruitful discussions were held there, and also because the Korea-Africa Summit that's currently being held right now, it's also focusing, business is one of the key sectors that it's also focusing on. So we've just taken a look at the Korean community in Africa and also how much the Korean community there is anticipating or has been looking forward to the summit. So for us to get a better understanding of Korea in Africa, as well as how familiar and friendly Korea feels to people on the continent, we've actually reached out to a Korean Gen Zer currently living in the continent. So she is Yelin Ho. She's a participant of the Global Green Growth Institute Rwanda Country Program. She'll help us answer some of the key questions we have on today's topic. So let's take a look at the screen.
Muraho, greeting from Rwanda. Hello, I'm Yelin Ho, currently living and working here in Rwanda. The Korean community here in Rwanda is about 200 to 300, with many individuals engaged in business or missionary work. But also there are a lot of young Korean interns or volunteers working in international development field, such as KOICA, NGOs, or international organizations like me. For me, I've been here in Rwanda for 11 months, working at GGGI, Global Green Growth Institute. It's an international organization which works closely with government of Rwanda to promote sustainable and inclusive green growth of the country. When it comes to K-waves, it is popular in some part of Africa, and Rwanda is no exception. I was so surprised to discover that so many people here, they know about Jumong, which is pretty classic for us. And in particular, the younger generation here, they love K-dramas and K-series such as Kingdom or The Queen of Tears, which makes me proudly happy. However, Korea is not widely known in other aspects, I would say. So there are still many people asking if I'm from North or South. But similarly, many people in Korea is not familiar with Rwanda, and they would assume Rwanda as a dangerous country by associating Rwanda with genocide, which happened 30 years ago. But people will be so surprised to know about their remarkable growth and changes since then. So Korea and Rwanda, we have generally good relations, but I have this feeling that we can do better, we can do more to raise awareness about each other. And I hope this Korea-Africa Summit will serve as valuable opportunity for this. And when talking about the younger generation here in Rwanda, they do have strong pride about their country, how rapidly they are developing, but also they have deep respect about their culture and tradition. Culturally, they value family, and so the importance of marriage and family is pretty high. They surely have a significant pressure to marry, and when it comes to wedding, they would remain. There are a lot of traditions remaining. For example, it is common for like 300, 400 family members together and celebrate a wedding for all day long, and some of them can do for a week, which I found pretty different with our culture.
Well, some very valuable insights from Yelin. I want to just, on behalf of our Newsdone fam, I want to say a big thank you to Yelin for the time she took to film this video and for helping us to learn more about Africa. And now moving on back to our discussion here in the studio. When talking about Korea's ties with Africa, which Yelin briefly mentioned in her answers, we can't forget the heartwarming, the touching stories of people who have actually brought the two cultures closer together, right, Jihi?
That's right. Well, that was an amazing interview, by the way. And among the many we know of, there's Father Lee Tae-seok, who was very revered as a doctor and a religious figure. He had volunteered to serve for the people in South Sudan during the internal conflict there, to provide medical treatment to over 300 people every day who were suffering, from internal war. And he also taught children different things, subjects, and even instruments at school in the local region, and tried to foster hope for them despite the harsh environment that they're living in. And although he unfortunately passed away at a young age of 48, he was continuously remembered as a very courageous and a very warm-hearted person. And his students are still following his footsteps as doctors, still serving for people and engaging in medical services.
I'll kind of remember the documentary that I saw on Father Lee Tae-seok. I think it was when I was in elementary school or middle school, and it was really touching because the things that he'd done for those in Sudan and for the people of Africa was just amazing. And as you mentioned, I think that it's really inspiring to see how his students actually have become doctors themselves and is kind of doing and paying back to the society what they've received from their teacher, right?
Yes.
Right, so this is indeed a very touching story that has definitely brought Korea and Africa much closer together. Now, Cheska, I guess the similar efforts are ongoing, right?
Yeah, but I want to talk about a bit more collaborative aspect. So one thing that I thought was very interesting was, as we all know, during the COVID-19, K-quarantine kind of became a very hot keyword, right? Our quarantine supplies, the way that we manage the COVID situation, sort of became a manual for a lot of international communities. Now, one thing that happened was, because it became so popular, our K-quarantine supplies export has increased by 25% to Africa. Now, in a way, I think this is one of the great ways that we can sort of collaborate on a global scale with countries like Africa, maybe in terms of global medical health and care, by maybe doing exports and imports together.
Definitely. This is like quarantine, or the medical field is also is definitely another area that we're seeing Korea and Africa cooperate together. Hope to see them cooperate more.
I know, I think that would
future.
be very, very amazing to see the global community come together in a time of crisis like this.
Right. Maybe they'll discuss that during the Korea-Africa Summit, which ends today.
I really hope so too. I hope they're watching this and thinking about it.
Right, and now going back to cultural connections, Yelena also briefly mentioned this in her video, but it appears that the Korean wave or K-culture is becoming bigger in Africa when compared to the past, right, Cheska?
Yeah, which was actually quite surprising. I mean, it just shows you the impact of the quote-unquote global media and the broadcast. It literally knows no borders, I suppose. And now, because it is becoming so popular in Africa, I mean, K-pop kind of led the cultural wave, but now people are learning Korean languages. They want to learn more about Korean food, and especially the martial arts, the taekwondo also.
Right.
And also, I think it is very common in African culture to enjoy the music and feel the group, right?
Right,
So I
right.
think in that sense, K-pop definitely paved the way to bring the people together to enjoy the music and probably dance to it. Yeah.
Oh, right. And this was like briefly mentioned by our panelist Chonghwa, who appeared on Newsstand on Monday. But
Yes.
she kind of mentioned that one thing that really stood out among millennials and Gen Zs in Africa was that they really love to dance music. So when she was living in Africa for about a year, there was this one guy who came up to her and invited her to dance.
Yes.
So that's really seemed like a fun culture in Africa.
I would love to be invited.
Definitely.
And maybe that's the reason why they're getting more interested in K-pop, right? It's so fun.
And there's a lot of group dance, right? K-pop is all about like coming
right.
together, doing like flash mobs and group
Right, right,
dances.
right.
So I feel like it fits really well, if I hear correctly, about the African culture of coming together and just grooving to the music. Yeah.
Right, definitely.
And
Now,
I've seen a lot of social media content covering these African people. They're dancing together.
Really?
Yeah. And they seem so full of joy
and energy.
They have a lot of energy, and their dance skills are just very
know.
natural.
Yeah. Like, no, it's not even natural, it's another level.
It's another
It's
level.
another
It's another level. And I watched that show on Monday when the panelist that you mentioned came out. And it was funny how that African person who offered her to dance together, she was shy and she said, "Oh, I can't dance." And he was like, "Oh, how can a person not know how to dance? How
such a
can a
beautiful
human
thing.
being?"
Yeah.
right. So maybe we'll get to see, I hope we can see like more like collaborative dance challenges or like content where like the younger generation of Korea and the younger generation of Africa kind of collaborate together, and we could see like some kind of random K-pop dance challenge, or vice versa. We could see them dancing to Africa music.
Yes, I mean, I haven't heard a lot of tunes, but African tunes have these great beats.
Right.
They really just make your heart go with
Yeah.
the beat. And I would love to, actually, that's a great idea. I would love to see some cross-cultural exchanges as well. Yeah.
Maybe we should try that with some of our panelists. Now, moving on back to our discussion, we were very interested in like K-pop and cultural connections between the two. But I want to ask you, Dee, what are some other areas of exchange that we're seeing between Korea and Africa?
Well, it's not just cultural exchanges, but there
obviously.
are a lot of business exchanges going on as well. It's because Korea lacks a lot of natural resources, right?
right.
Not lack, but it basically doesn't have any natural
Right.
resources, and it was able to develop in such a short period of time, just within a few decades, I guess because of the human resources rather than natural resources. And we have the technological capabilities, and with that and with the African natural resources and the plenty of labor force that they have, is creating like a synergy effect. And because Africa has a lot of areas that still need development and sturdy infrastructure, Korean steel companies and other like manufacturing companies, construction companies are there to help grow their regional economy as well. And we're also, of course, getting help from them as well. So there are a lot of business exchanges going on. And like Cheska mentioned earlier, our exports of the COVID-19 quarantine products jumped a lot during that period. And our products, not only these medical supplies, but also construction-related technology and the capabilities are well known in the African region.
And like this kind of came into my mind, but I think that another area that we're seeing Korea and Africa cooperate together is, have you guys heard of the K Rice Belt Initiative?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah, so it's basically Korea like providing know-how on like rice growing technology and also way to like grow rice better so that these countries in Africa who rely heavily on rice, they can grow rice on their own so that they can rely less on imports. So I think that the MOU between the Korean government and like 8 African countries was signed last year.
Right.
So definitely agriculture is another big sector that we're seeing cooperation between Korea and Africa. So that's also worth noting. And I want to say to you, Ji, a very good point that you mentioned is that Korea is also receiving help from Africa. It's not only Korea that is helping out Africa, but we're also helping, we're receiving help from Africa as well. So Jessica, before going on here, we talked about how some of the resources that we are getting help from Africa, like from those spoons, right?
Yes, absolutely. So one of the things that I found quite interesting and why this is so important to learn more about other countries is that, as you mentioned, it is not a one-way street. It is also a two-way street. And you briefly mentioned it to me before going on air. But was it the gadget on the phone?
It's like one of like
Components?
the
components of what goes into our phone is actually from Africa or made from Africa, right? So one of the very key elements of our everyday life, the resource that basically sort of creates our digital life is from Africa.
Right.
So I think that's just one of the ways that we have to learn that the global community isn't just about a one-way street, but it is really about a collaboration and an ongoing effort between the two. Yeah.
Right, definitely. And talking about ongoing collaboration and how we'll get to, we're seeing the summit going on. So I think that anticipation is really building up about how we could possibly see more exchanges between Korea and the African continent. So do you also think that we'll get to see them interact and cooperate more in the future?
I really think so. And I actually want to speak more on the cultural level because I truly believe in soft power. So yes, there are multiple business opportunities and resources that will be negotiated. But I think one of the ways that we, as the millennials and Gen Z, can really promote this effort going forward is to build an understanding that this is not just about Africa, or this is not just about South Korea, but really it's now we're becoming a global community, right? As Jihi mentioned, we can easily access a lot of dance reels or even enjoy the lives of other people on the other side of the border. So I really hope that this Africa Summit does take what it needs to in terms of business and global cooperation. But as the participants of global citizens, I hope we really embrace it with an open mind and see what the future can bring us.
Right, because as you've mentioned, nowadays the world is interconnected. Exactly. So I think that it's more important than ever that we get to understand each other and know about each other's culture even more.
Yes.
Right. And now, Ji, do you also expect to see more like exchanges between Korea and Africa?
Definitely. And also, I've heard that we've been seeing the development of different continents one by one. I'm not sure in which order they've developed, but Africa at the moment is the least developed continent in the world, and it has plenty of room for development.
Right.
And because we're living in a globalized world, we have to really help each other. And through these exchanges, they have to be a win-win relationship, like we mentioned earlier. It's not just Korea providing help to them, but Korea also receiving help probably on the natural resources side because we lack them. And so moving forward, I'm sure there are going to be a lot of exchanges in the cultural field, the business field, as well as the agricultural field, and hopefully human-to-human exchanges as well. We can be receiving a lot of foreign students from Africa that can learn from Korea, and they can bring what they've earned from here to there to contribute to the development of their region as well.
Right, definitely right.
Actually, if I may add, on the educational level, I also think it's important because I think, as we discussed right before we started, I said, it would be great if one of the panelists or one of us had traveled to Africa, right? So I hope there is more opportunities for foreign exchange students, or even just being able to actually go out there and learn about something. Because one of the things that I learned when I was studying in the States is that these opportunities to actually be in different countries itself, like physically be there to witness and interact with the people opens your mind and
it's
eyes to
eye-opening.
it. It's a completely different experience than watching it on YouTube or Reels, right?
Right. Yeah, I definitely agree with you on like the need to open up more like educational exchange programs so that more African students can visit Korea and more Korean students can visit Africa. I don't know about what the situation is like in Africa, but for me as a person who studied in a Korean university, I think that most of my friends or people around me went to exchange student either to Europe or United States. But I think that I've never seen any of my friends picking Africa to go on an exchange or study abroad. So definitely this is important because these students are, as we always mention, the new generation. They're gonna lead the society moving forward. So yeah, these exchange programs, they definitely need more of a boost.
I know, and if there were, I would have probably went because I actually did sign up for a volunteer program at Cape Town.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and then it just, there was some logistical things that I couldn't go. But at least in the United States, they actively promoted these kind of programs. So I really hope that through these kind of summits and exchanges, they do open up more opportunities for students and people like us to travel. Yeah.
Right, definitely. Hope to see that we can see more opportunities. And last but not least, as I mentioned earlier, today is the last part of our 3-episode Africa series, and it's also the last day of the 2024 Korea-Africa Summit, the first ever summit of this kind. So any last thoughts or words that you guys would like to add?
Well, there are a lot of room for exchanges and cooperation, like I mentioned, and I'd like to see a lot more of Koreans promoting Korea in Africa as well, but also Africans coming in a lot more. Actually, we are all seeing a lot more foreigners here in the country, but I hope that they can also promote their countries. It's a big continent, and we often know Africa as just Africa, but there are so many different countries within Africa, right?
Cultures.
That's right. So I hope that our understanding of this big continent increases as they promote a lot more of their countries, and we provide them with the opportunities to do so here in the country.
Right. Anything you'd like to add?
You know, the saying knowledge is power. I think the first step to really understanding what love is to actually get to know about the person, right? So I hope that this summit, which was first ever, which is very, very monumental, right? But I hope this is only the beginning to many more to come, to provide people like us for opportunities to actually get to learn more about the country. And again, like we said, more opportunities for people like us to actually travel and do a lot of exchanges. Yeah.
Definitely. And until we wait for those many more to come exchanges, NewsGen is here every day from 9:30 to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you more topics young people are talking about. Special thanks today to Cheska Dainha.
Pleasure's always mine. Thank you.
And Chichihi.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for watching. Tomorrow is Memorial Day, a national holiday here in Korea, so we're taking a day off. We'll see you on Friday. We are News Generation.